what's he actually like, Robert? Is he going to be a good king?
Well, I hope he listens
difficult, doesn't
he's tricky. I think that there's no doubt that the king used to get on better with Harry.
Really?
There's
Why do you say that?
That's what I understand to be the truth. I mean, I think that the people that know them well said that was part of that. They had the heartbreaking side of this whole fallout was that the king and Harry used to sort of see eye to eye more. They used to have more time. They used to get each other more. Whereas I think with William and the king, there's always been clashes over the ivory in the royal collection, and clashes over just little things.
The appearance of Prince George, I remember in a photograph on a desk they had a massive row about that.
He can be quite, not controlling, but he's a bit tricky. He's got a bit of a temper. Like
well,
most
you
people.
use the following words to describe William. You say he's occasionally been over-assertive, can be difficult to handle, with aides approaching sensitive matters carefully.
Yeah.
Despite his public composure, insiders describe William as prone to mood swings.
I think that's fair, as I wrote it. But also, I think that if you go and speak to a few people off the record, they would say that's probably being generous.
That clip you've just watched, the discussion about King Charles, Prince Harry and Prince William, really lays bare something the British press pretends not to understand. The royal family's internal dynamics have always been more complicated than the tabloids admit. And the idea that Meghan somehow created tension is not only misleading, it erases decades of long-standing issues within the monarchy itself. So today we're diving into the deeper context behind what was said in that clip. A king who reportedly struggled to communicate with his eldest son. A son whose temperament has been whispered about by insiders for years. And why Harry, for a long time, was uniquely positioned as the emotional bridge between them before everything collapsed. Let's break this down. The commentator in the clip makes a striking point. He claims that King Charles used to get on better with Harry than with William. Now, this is something that has surfaced in multiple royal biographies and insider accounts, not as a dramatic scandal, but as a matter of personality. Harry has often been described as warmer, more emotionally open, easier to engage in personal conversation. Charles, who himself has a sensitive and introspective personality, reportedly found it easier to connect with Harry's more relaxed energy. This dynamic doesn't mean William and Charles didn't have a bond, of course they did. But the emotional rhythm was different. Charles is reflective. William is decisive. Charles intellectualizes. William acts. And according to several royal reporters, that mismatch sometimes created friction. It is not that Harry was the favourite. It's that each son connected with Charles in very different ways, and for many years Harry's was simply the easier relationship. The clip mentions clashes over the ivory in the royal collection, arguments over artwork, disagreements over what sits on a desk during official photos. These sound minor, but in royal life, symbolism is everything. Think about that. A photograph of Prince George on a desk triggered tension. Why? Because in a family where public image is currency, the smallest gesture can be interpreted as favoritism, hierarchy, or messaging about succession. William, as the heir, has always been under pressure to curate a future monarchy that feels modern, streamlined, decisive. Charles, however, has spent decades cultivating his own identity and legacy, a legacy that William may not entirely agree with. When you combine two strong personalities with two different visions, friction is inevitable, and this is crucial. These tensions existed long before Meghan entered the picture. The tabloids just found it more convenient to blame an outsider rather than acknowledge that the royal household has always had internal disagreements. The commentator describes William as occasionally over-assertive, difficult to handle, and prone to mood swings. Again, these are not claims invented for drama. These descriptions have circulated for years among palace insiders and royal correspondents. Now, let's handle this responsibly. We're not labelling William. We're acknowledging what journalists and royal biographers have repeatedly said when discussing his leadership style. William is known to be passionate, intense, and sometimes impatient. He wants efficiency. He wants clarity. He wants control. And none of these things make someone bad. They make someone human. But here's where the storytelling becomes problematic. When Harry shows emotion, the press calls him unstable. When William shows emotion, the press calls him decisive or taking charge. Same behaviours, two different narratives. And Meghan saw that double standard up close. This discrepancy, this protective shield around William, is part of what pushed Harry to speak out. It wasn't personal resentment. It was the refusal to let Meghan be scapegoated, while others were quietly shielded. One line from the clip stands out. That was the heartbreaking side of the fallout. Because Harry's departure didn't just shake the institution, it shook Charles personally. For all their differences, Charles and Harry shared a bond centred on emotional vulnerability, environmental advocacy, and the pressure of public life. When the relationship deteriorated, it wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. And this matters. The tabloids often portray Harry's departure as a betrayal of duty. But inside the family, it was seen as a loss, a fracture that hurt all parties involved. And while public narratives have often blamed Meghan, the real fracture points were already there: decades of tension, mismatched personalities, and institutional rigidity. Once the tension between Charles, William, and Harry became public, the British media didn't ask why. They asked, who can we blame? And Meghan, an American woman, biracial, outspoken, and independent, became the easiest target. But here's the truth. The clip reinforces. The royal family already had unresolved cracks. Meghan didn't create them. She just entered the scene at the moment those cracks could no longer be hidden. The press crafted a cartoon villain version of Meghan because it served their business model. But behind the scenes, the real issues were generational, emotional, and institutional. The clip is a rare moment where insiders acknowledge that complexity. For years, Harry was the glue, the one who could soften tension, lighten moods, and bridge emotional distance between his father and brother. But you cannot expect someone to be the family mediator and the family punching bag. When the press pressure became unbearable, when Meghan faced relentless criticism and the institution refused to protect her, Harry made a choice. Not a rebellious choice, not a destructive choice, a human choice. He protected his family. The same man who, as the clip suggests, once understood both his father and brother better than anyone, finally realized that he had to step away for the sake of his wife, his children, and his own mental peace. The clip ends with the commentator saying that calling William difficult might actually be generous, according to insiders. This is why transparency matters. Not to tear anyone down, but to acknowledge reality. The royals are human. They disagree, they argue, they clash. They have temperaments, moods, sensitivities, insecurities, ambitions. Recognizing that does not diminish them. It makes the entire narrative more honest. And it dismantles the lazy idea that Meghan is somehow the root cause of every conflict in the monarchy. When you understand the long-standing tension between Charles and William, when you understand Harry's place in the family, when you understand how emotional communication has always been the monarchy's Achilles heel, suddenly the entire story looks very different. What makes this clip striking is not what is said overtly, but what is quietly implied. That the real tensions in the monarchy are between the king and the heir. That emotional conflict existed long before Meghan. that insiders are far more candid off-camera than the press ever prints, that the institution has always struggled with communication, that Harry's relationship with his father once offered a critical emotional balance in the family, and that losing that connection was painful for everyone involved. When we step back, we see a monarchy that is less a fairy tale and more a very complicated family, under immense pressure, with unresolved wounds. Let's be honest, it is easier for the press to blame Meghan than to report on internal disagreements between two future kings. Blaming Meghan sells papers. Discussing generational tension within the monarchy? Not so much. Meghan became the lens through which all pre-existing issues were redirected, not because she caused them, but because she was outsiders, modern, unpredictable, and unprotected. But as this clip shows, when insiders speak candidly, the truth looks nothing like the tabloid narrative. If there's one message from the clip, it's this: Harry didn't walk away from a perfect family. He walked away from a family already struggling behind the scenes, and a press machine determined to make him the villain for choosing peace. And in many ways, this clip quietly confirms something Harry has said for years, that he loved his father, had a deep connection with him, and felt the loss of that relationship profoundly. This isn't a story of betrayal. It's a story of unresolved family tension, institutional rigidity, and emotional truth breaking through curated royal silence. And understanding that not the tabloid headlines is the only way to understand what really happened.